I will bring us out from behind the curtain. Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. Some call me the Martian Manhunter.
And I'm your co-host, Buddy.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about Zack Snyder's Justice League. Before we do that, what should the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
Well, that's pretty simple. On this podcast, we like to talk about games and also Zack Snyder films. Like what an undercurrent to the course of uh the Subderbs Talk About Games podcast, which started a couple of months before BVS came out, and BVS was our very first movie episode that was outside of the realm of games, right? Because I was so hyped for it that we had to talk about it. And now here we are 5 years later, and the Snyder Cut is out and it's released, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into spoilers. I guess technically I opened with a spoiler, but who cares? Let's give our pre-spoilery impressions.
Sure.
I mean, we've discussed this a little bit outside of the cast. So you want to go first?
Yeah, so man, I wrote something that was very concise that I liked a lot. I said I do think it's good, but not great. I lament that it's not more complex or interesting, but it is absolutely better than the theatrical. I absolutely think it's worth a watch, though probably as a two-parter. I watched it parts 1, 2, 3, then 4, 5, 6, which I think is like the correct way to watch it in a lot of ways. Like I've read and I've talked to people who said that like going the full 4 hours is like woof. And I feel like if I had done the full 4 hours, I would have been in that exact same place. But just kind of like a quirk of how I watched it happened to cut it in half, which felt great for me. I also think that this movie is this movie is good, and it could be like really, really good. But there's like a lot of bullshit in here that kind of like brings it down, which makes me a little bit sad to say. Like I wanted to come in here and say like it's the greatest thing of all time, but
Yeah, no, that's probably the biggest surprise for me of this is that you didn't absolutely adore it.
Listen, I absolutely loved it, right? I absolutely loved it, but I like it. I'm not like busting down the door in the same way that I have with some of these other films.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fair. I actually I similarly I thought it was good. I didn't think it was It said I'll stand by this. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's bad. But I don't know, that's like splitting hairs at some point. Like on a 10-point scale, I said it was.
I mean, you said 6 or 7. 6 or 7 is some flavor of good. That's mild good, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on like the net promoter score level. That's like negative to neutral. But that's neither here nor there. I thought it was much better than the theatrical cut, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's really made me. I was kind of nice to the theatrical cut. Well, we'll talk about this stuff in spoilers, I guess.
Yeah. No, some people have characterized this as like a giant middle finger to Joss Whedon, and like, I'd be like, yes, and he kind of deserved it. Like after watching, just like kind of seeing what came out of this instead. I would say. So what one of our friends, a friend of the cast, JB, said, so good enough for me to watch it, but not enough to force other people to watch it with me. And I think that's a pretty good summation, right? Like if you're a comics person or you care, you follow this stuff, I'd say it's worth a watch. I did the straight 4-hour stint. I thought it felt longer.
Did you have a hard time with it?
I was watching it with company, so I was able to kind of, talk a little bit about it, which made it a little bit more bearable. But it felt longer than 4 hours. Like it felt like a slog. Not that it was, not that it was terrible, but like it's just kind of like this is a long, like this was like the entire night, right? Like, so yeah, I mean, I think I could get behind the splitting it into two. The Red Letter Meter guys point out there's like a natural cutting point, like right after the first battle with Steppenwolf.
Yeah, that is right after the 3 in the 1, 2, 3 that I lined up.
Yeah. So yeah. But yeah. So these are soft recommend, I guess is the way to put it. So I'll say it's better than Iron Man 3. So
wow. Wait, really? So where would this fall in like your? That's interesting. Where do I think this falls?
Yeah. So I don't know. So like Iron Man 3 is the worst. Is famously my least liked Marvel movie. I don't know if let me bring up my Marvel movie.
Yeah, rankings. I need to find my Marvel notes to remember where some of my
Yeah.
where some of my rankings were, because like my instinct is to say that I liked it better than Infinity War and Endgame. Um, but is that actually
So
true?
I
All
would do
right.
that, but we also had different rankings.
Wow, I said Endgame was second worst. Wow, I kind of forgot how low I ranked that.
Ooh, hmm.
And then Infinity War is okay. All right.
So I'd put it around Iron Man 2, which for me, puts it above Thor 1, Captain Marvel, Incredible Hulk, and Iron Man 3.
Okay, yeah, I would also put it around Iron Man 2. I would maybe put it above Thor Ragnarok, which is just under Spider-Man Far From Home, Captain America the Winter Soldier, like Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which I guess is fairly favorable overall. But
Yeah.
I'm looking at some of these ones, right? Like I like it better than it's like Thor, Hulk, Thor 2, Guardians of the Galaxy 1, Iron Man 2, Ant-Man and the Wasp. I like it better than all of those. I also think I like it more with Thor Ragnarok. It feels a lot like Thor Ragnarok to me.
Okay. See, I
Um,
really like Thor Ragnarok, so that doesn't work for me. But it's in that kind of like, you
yeah.
know, it's bottom third, not terrible. Type of area.
But I will say that I actually think that this could have been in another world, like in an alternate universe. This could have been like top caliber Avengers Age of Ultron, some of my favorite, like some of my favorite stuff. Just because like there's a lot of bullshit in here that I would want to strip out. Like I think you could make a very, very good 3-hour movie out of this by
Yeah,
like taking some of the bloat out.
I think I agree with you. I think that the movie has some. I think we should probably move into spoilers at this point, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah, let's talk about spoilers for sure.
All right. So well, I guess. So how do you want to start? Right? This has been your
Maybe we
thing to
can
look
talk
forward to.
about the theatrical this has really given me a poor view of the theatrical cut. Like something I said about the theatrical cut at the time is that some of the jokes landed for me and some of them didn't, right? And I was like, like that's fine, that's natural. I like that there's like a little bit more sort of like upbeat humor in here than there was in like BVS and Man of Steel, though I maintain that BVS and Man of Steel also have plenty of humor in them. People just don't think about or ignore it. Um and having them back to back has just proven that like I don't know, maybe maybe he actually did keep Joss Whedon jokes. I kind of assumed all jokes were additions by Joss Whedon at the time,
Hmm.
right? But now I'm in this position where half of the jokes okay. But now I'm in this sort of position where half of the jokes are like still in the movie, and I guess we are to assume they are Snyder cut jokes, right? And half of the jokes are not in the movie, which we are to assume are Joss Whedon additions. And it would actually make sense if that were to be the case, but we can't actually like prove it. Like hypothetically speaking, Zack Snyder could have just looked at a couple of these like Joss Whedon jokes and been like, you know what, let's keep
Well,
this
so
in.
according to lore, he's never seen the theatrical release. Like his wife
Oh,
and
that's
Christopher
true. And
Nolan
Christopher
told,
Nolan, because he's
yeah,
friends with Christopher Nolan,
they were like, "Don't
told
watch
him not to
this."
watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
That's fair. I guess then I do have to just like say, boy, Joss Whedon, you really fucking screwed the pooch, man.
yeah.
Like,
No,
wow. Because every joke that was bad that I thought of at the time, and I was like, this is one that's pretty stupid and bad, and I don't like. But then there were jokes in there where it's like Alfred, like cracking wise at Master Wayne about whatever. Like I always love those jokes. I think that those jokes are great. So those are still in there. And actually plenty of the Flash's jokes are in there. Like his personality is absolutely the same, but he doesn't go on this like super awkward like thing about brunch. It's the brunch joke that everyone complains about because it's like maybe the worst of them in the theatrical cut.
so, so,
But the other thing that it made me realize about the theatrical cut is like I talk about narrative arthritis where like moments happen too quickly next to each other. You just go like bop 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 bop. Just having the space to breathe between them, and having the time to establish motivation for things to happen was like huge. And I think is probably the reason that this is a well-reviewed movie at like the current moment, right?
yeah,
Like,
no, I think this is true for like a lot of movies that we've talked about, right? That like
yeah,
things feel like they don't have the space to breathe ever since the like kind of advent of like widely available prestige television on streaming services. Um, But just to kind of get back to that point, like so I didn't rewatch the theatrical cut in preparation.
mm,
I probably should have, but I remember like enjoying the Flash in the original. In this one, I absolutely hated him. He just felt so cringe, So cringe.
Really?
Yeah, like
Wow. Okay.
every time he spoke, I was just like, stop talking, just stop. And like like at the time, I wanted to attribute that to like him feeling like an MCU character like shoved into a Zack Snyder film, and like it working worse in the Zack Snyder cut because it was more Zack Snyder than Joss Whedon, who tried to Marvelify the original Justice League, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if that'll hold up on a rewatching of either or both movies, but like I like I couldn't stand just a lot of everything that happened with him. I liked the kind of the intro scene. Um, like I couldn't stand him talking in it, but like the part where like he does the like where the car flips
Mm.
and he saves the woman. Um, I thought that was cool. I just kind of in like a personal note, I just didn't like the way they did super speed for him. Like I like the way they did Quicksilver in the X-Men movies much better. Like it felt like he kind of like you know when the Flash does it, it feels kind of like they stop time and he kind of like walks around in it, whereas like it feels like Quicksilver's moving fast in the X-Men movies, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, it's this is a weird and very niche point, and I won't hang on it too long, but like it just feels different to me in a way that I didn't super like.
The
Um,
one thing I liked about the Flash's humor is it did seem more derivative of his like character. And derivative is like a weird that has a bad connotation, but I mean to say that like the humor itself was derived from his character and felt like things he would actually say. I think a problem that Marvel movies run into some of the time is that they're so quippy, right? That like it takes on this like surreality. Nobody actually, kicking the shit out of each other are cracking wise,
right.
right? Or whatever. Like you can say badass one-liners and there's badass one-liners. Like that's fair, I guess. Um, but there's something about like I don't know, like the Falcon and Spider-Man having banter as they're like beating each other up in like the Civil War airport scene that I find to be unrealistic. Whereas
Sure.
this is an example of the Flash is his humor is realistically driven from where he is at any individual kind of like moment in time.
You know what? I will totally give you that. I just thought his character was super cringy. Um,
Fair enough.
Although apparently
Yeah,
the
I mean,
audience
I do think
disagrees with
all of the
me.
characters got much better, especially Cyborg,
Oh
who,
yeah.
boy, you really understand why fucking Ray Fisher is so pissed
Oh yeah.
about
Oh
Joss
yeah.
Whedon.
Absolutely.
He is a glorified extra in the theatrical cut compared to this, where he is like the heart and core of the narrative. Um, and like an inextricable piece of how things progress and move forward. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was kind of some of the stuff was kind of ham-fisted, like the scene where like they're walking into the lab and the dad sees him and is like, cancel that. The threat is legit and no one's like I just looked at it, I was like, oh, that like that to me felt like almost like the Martha scene from BVS, which is like, you know, I get what they were going for, but it just didn't resonate with me. It just kind of felt bad. And I felt his story like I didn't think it was bad. I just thought it felt ham-fisted. That's the best way to put it.
Interesting. That is interesting. I guess that is a little bit like the Martha. That moment worked for me very well. I liked it a lot actually, just as a because everybody gets their own arcs in this, which is
Yeah,
great.
no,
And
it's
I
gonna
was
be
just
great.
like, I can't believe how much I wanted that, right? Like, and this honestly makes it better than some of like the big Avengers movies, right? Um, in a lot of ways, if I'm being honest, because like, it's not just that individual character, like it's not just that like the team itself is sort of like progressing through being a team, but we are watching as Cyborg is resolving issues with his dad, right? The Flash saves the day, and part of that is like a resolving of issues with his dad, and like watching Diana, who sort of you kind of start a little bit in media res, I guess, because you find out through dialogue that she said no, but like off screen, right?
Right.
And it kind of creates this air, but then she actually does get like come in and get involved and sort of like come back to being a part of the team. I just think all that stuff was great. Plus all of these like little character interactions. It seems like every character got like a little scene where they got to talk to one of the others and they got to like bond. Right? Like there's a moment where Aquaman is talking about Cyborg. And Aquaman is the pessimist on the team, right? He's the guy that's like, this isn't gonna work. We're not gonna make it work. And he's like, the guy just lost his dad and we're like asking him to do this, and it's like that's a real like
Yeah.
emotional acuity that we would never have seen from the Aquaman in the theatrical cut. And that's funny because like I praised a bit that got cut which was sort of the only cool thing that Aquaman did in that movie, where he sat on the lasso of truth and sort of just like talked about his character. That was a neat little moment in that cut. I was just blown away by what we have here, where like he gets to talk to Diana, and they're like, bonding about being outcasts from their like respective tribes or whatever, where he talks about Cyborg, where he has this interaction with Batman that is great. I honestly think one of the big things is the distance between Aquaman's recruitment scene right at the start of the movie and sort of where the team comes together at the end of part 3 is a huge deal, because when they come together on that rooftop, it does sort of feel like the unlikely heroes are like getting, or a better way to explain this is when Bruce Wayne says, like, really? To the Flash, when the Flash is like, yeah, of course I'll join. It's because, for the last 2 hours, we've been sitting in a world where Bruce Wayne hasn't really been able to convince people to get on side.
Yeah. No. That makes sense. That makes sense to me. Ragnarok points out that if the Avengers movie were 4 hours, they might have more bonding scenes, and I think
Yeah.
that's
I
not.
mean, honestly, the Avengers movies, by the way, do this. This is part of what I love about Age of Ultron. They absolutely do this in Age of Ultron, and it is really good. Uh,
Yeah,
so
I think part of the problem with the Avengers movies is that they are very willing to put a lot of the character development and the character arcs off into the solo movies, and those
yeah,
obviously don't have a lot of bonding because you don't always have multiple heroes in the movies, and so because they want to focus on the team stuff in the movies, you don't like like that bonding is the thing that gets kind of lost in the mix, right? So, um,
but this is all stuff that's very reminiscent of like them sitting around in the apartment with Mjolnir and trying to
mm,
trying to pick up Mjolnir. It's like all of that kind of stuff. It's not as lighthearted as that stuff is,
yeah.
obviously. Like that is selling me on this is a group of friends, right? Which I don't think the Justice League is trying to sell me on,
Right.
obviously. Um, but it is the same sort of thing that I really want to see or like love to see.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think they do the characters pretty good justice in this movie.
I
It's really
also think that they did better with Steppenwolf, and which is funny because like I recommended like the thing I wanted from Steppenwolf is give him no fucking lines. He's just a force of nature with who he doesn't need a fucking motivation. He doesn't need to tell me things. And that actually kind of ended up not being true. I liked this version of Steppenwolf quite a lot. Both in terms of like as a directive of action, what I call that, like he has interesting powers and does visually cool stuff, um and as a like small character in an otherwise like big film who has his own sort of like goals and motivation. I would not have thought that they would have been able to sell me on that sort of thing,
yeah.
but
I think if he had been just on his own, it would have been hard to do. But like putting him in the context of Dark Side, I think worked.
yeah,
Right,
absolutely,
and
especially his like little conversations with Darkseid and Desaad. So
y-
good.
yeah, and also there's space for it in a 4 hour movie, right? Like if
Yeah,
this was a 2 hour movie and we needed to like cut down some stuff to like, I'd be like pull a lot of Steppenwolf stuff out of it and just kind of have him be the henchman, right? With like some, but I did enjoy it. There were one thing, so this is like very small, but like his eyes in the new model, just like he looks almost kind of like a doe, like like a deer, like that
like
you'd
a
see it
deer.
like out in the forest, right? Like they're just like the whites are like so big. I just like look at him. It's like he looks like too cartoony to me. He looks almost like Bugs Bunny, but like
Interesting. Well, I do think that them alien himing up was much better. Like the version of him in the theatrical cut looks terrible,
yeah, no, I
which I
agree.
guess is just a matter of VFX. Like maybe you could have sold me on that. But I also just like the knife armor, the edgelord armor that he wears. I thought that was cool just on its face, and I remember people clowning on this. Like I was like, hey, he's covered in fucking knives. That's sweet, right? But then the way that it works in the action of the movie, it makes it even better, right? Like he's getting hit with the arrows, and then there's that thing where like the armor chops them all off at the same time. What a fucking sick moment, right? Or like there's parts where he's getting shot, I think by Batman's like gun, and you can see that each time he gets shot, like the blades ripple or whatever. And I was just like, what a neat little effect. That was so cool,
Yeah,
right?
no, I agree. The armor was great. His eyes were the things that bothered me.
Yeah, for
Like
sure. Also his freaky hands. It was like I think it's 3 fingers and like 2 thumbs or whatever, and I was just like all on board for this. But the other thing is that the action is so clear and much better when there is more time for it.
Hmm.
And, like, I remember in the theatrical cut, I said all of the action was bad except for the Themyscira sequence, which I was correct about. I was like, I'm pretty sure that was Zack Snyder, and the rest of this has been cut, which turned out to be basically true. Um, and the Themyscira sequence is elongated. There's like more to it, and it's fucking awesome, right? Like, there's a part I rewound it. There's a part where he like takes that horse and he like just chucks the horse. I was like, yes, this is what I'm here for. He's like cutting Amazon's fucking heads off. Give me this, please. Like,
Oh yeah, no, like this reminded, it wasn't quite as like as wuxia as Watchmen was, but like like silly, like not silly, but like kind of like unrealistic stuff, but like that was like still fun, right? Like shooting
yep.
the arrow to like drag the box forward to get it. It was like
Oh, I
that is like very
love that.
comics, and that's fun. It's fine for what it was, right? Like,
Yeah,
um,
or I mean, I think my favorite detail, and this is one of those things, right? Like Zack Snyder's obviously an action filmmaker who's very capable at making action films, right? Like there's a moment where fighting the Amazons, he catches an arrow, right? And then he later does that exact same thing to the missile. And in the theatrical cut, that moment is like bad because first of all, I think it's bad because he says dumb lines at the same time, right? But in this cut, it's actually a nice throwback because he catches the missile and then he taunts Diana about the Amazons, or maybe he taunts Diana about the Amazons and then catches the missile, and it's just like it just feels so much more kind of like a cohesive, like project. And the weird thing is that some of the action that I would have expected not to be like Joss Whedon stuff. Like so for instance, in the theatrical cut, there's this weird part where they see the people being held hostage by Steppenwolf and then pause and tell some jokes and then go rescue the people, right? And at first I thought that was like I was like, this is weird, but this doesn't feel like Joss Whedon to me, right? Like Joss Whedon is a guy who's like, heroes are heroic. They go and they save people. As soon as they see people in danger, they jump into action. But it turned out, nope. Pausing to tell dumb jokes was the Joss Whedon thing. In the Snyder cut, as soon as Cyborg sees it, he rushes in. Like, and I don't know if that stuff just felt cool.
yeah. No, I feel like people will shit on Joss Whedon for like the theatrical cut, but I feel like he was also between a rock and a hard place. He's
Oh,
probably
I
it's
think
like the
absolutely the
Marvel
people
fire,
who
like
are to blame are like studio executives. By the way, Nick in chat says he had 7 fingers. It was like 2 fingers on the opposite side from the thumb. So
a lot of
that I
fingers.
guess that's where a lot of fingers.
That's why he was able to throw that horse so well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I had a lot of like little stuff that like I thought was not great. Oh, like fucking every time they zoom in on Diana, they just play that like Amazon singing thing. I was like, this feels like a bad leitmotif to me. Like it was just like so grating and so like out like so different. It stuck out to me. Did you have any thoughts
Oh,
on that?
interesting. I loved the music. I mean, my I think I tweeted this. The number one difference to me between the theatrical and this cut was probably the music because it held together. Like these are powerful leitmotifs. Obviously, I'm the person for it, right? I've seen
Yeah.
Man of Steel and BVS a million fucking times. Um, but we have established leitmotifs for Superman, for Batman, for Wonder Woman, right? Why are we not using them when they are doing the cool, awesome things that they do? Um, and yeah, exactly. Like Phelan in chat says, I love the music for Diana. Me too, right? Like that electric cello, which is from BVS and then later gets used in Wonder Woman. Like it is mind-boggling to me that they did not carry this forward. I think this is one of the big things that, by the way, keeps the that keeps like the DC movies. I would say like the DC movies are better than the Marvel movies about is probably music. Like really in the Avengers there's just the Avengers leitmotif and all the other music is just
Whatever. Yeah.
invented on the spot, which seems terrible to me. If you're going to do this big giant connected universe, right? You should have consistent music from film to film, right? You can have these like I don't know. I don't. You just it's not hard to have these kinds of
No, I
like
agree.
leitmotifs and do something kind of like what happened in Justice League.
No, I and
Oh my god, the random singing that went on for this is the kind of shit that I would cut. This is why I'm saying that there's a really good 3-hour movie hidden in
mm.
here. There's so much shit.
Oh yeah, when
That's
there's like singing him back into the ocean, I was like,
yeah.
what the hell is that about? And she like
I mean, to be
sniffs his
honest,
sweater. Like what?
yeah, she like big whiff, just and the funny thing is I actually kind of liked that moment in a theoretical sense. I feel like if I read that moment on a script, I would say, "Oh, that's nice," right? The public doesn't really factor into this movie all that much. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of interest in this film
So Nick
with
points out that like every time the Amazon Music played, it said ancient lamentation music playing, which is just like kind of kind of like perfectly encapsulates why like it stuck out so much to me. Like I agree with you in general. The music's great, but
mm,
but for the Diana, like it's just like it doesn't. It's so different than everything else that plays, and it's just so obvious. It's like, and here's Wonder Woman, and it's time to have the women singing again, right? Like
yeah.
it's sorry,
Oh,
yeah,
one other music thing I want to mention, by the way, is that when Superman gets resurrected and he's like disoriented and fights everybody, it plays the music from the. I'm actually really sad that this music went away because it's probably my favorite piece of music in the DC EU, which is in Man of Steel. It's like the fight music, which I think is technically like Zod's theme, maybe, but it plays that music, which I thought was really evocative. Where like in the theatrical cut, first of all, the Superman stuff was shorter. That fight was very quick and not interesting because it wasn't set up as well. But in this one, like I don't know, there's something about the framing and the change of the music, and also maybe the desaturation that just makes it seem like holy fuck, like I know cognitively that Superman is gonna see Lois Lane. They're gonna fly to a farm. He's gonna look into a sunset and be like, okay, I'm cool, right? But in the moment, it just felt incredibly threatening. Like in the sense that like like when you rewatch Infinity War and we all know what happens, right? You can still kind of get caught up in the tension of it. That's
right.
what it felt like. And I think it was entirely just like the musical cue of like, I remember the last time a Kryptonian went fucking berserk in Metropolis because this music played and it kind of puts you in that headspace a little bit. And like I think that was fucking sweet.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on the musical point. I still don't like that scene, just kind of where you fight. Like it feels like it gets resolved too easily, right? Like he wakes up and then he like goes and like hangs out with Lois Lane and then it's done and it's like 5 seconds of screen time. Still another thing I'm a huge fan of. It's a fun fight scene, right?
Mm.
Like and I wish they could do a little bit more to justify it more or like maybe make bringing Superman back from wherever his mind is gone is important. It's also like this is
Well,
also
so I think they did a good job. This is something I really didn't like in the theatrical cut. They didn't justify. It just felt like, oh, and now we have to resurrect Superman. Okay, yeah, let's resurrect. Like they didn't come to that naturally, but in the Snyder cut there is a conversation, and it's actually a really good conversation. Like it's probably more strategically deep than most superhero like planning session conversations get, outside of maybe like a couple of times in some of the like Avengers movies, I guess. I I can't remember anything off the top of my head, but I want to include that caveat. But like there's a part where, like they talk about, okay, what do the mother boxes do? You can recreate a burning house. And Batman talks about like, oh, this is like hiding the mother boxes is a losing strategy. That is a strategy to not lose. It's not a strategy to win. And like, that conversation getting them to, we need to get Superman back because he's the only person that can like really put Steppenwolf down. Um,
yeah.
I thought was very good and much much better just from a plot
Oh,
perspective
I agree with
than
that. I
than
agree
what
with
we
that
had
aspect
in
of it.
the
Of
theatrical cut. But yeah, I
absolutely.
agree with you that him going crazy. I feel like him. In the first one, they characterize it differently because they talk about like Pet Cemetery, where like the thing comes back and it's evil, right?
Right.
Um, which I understand is like first of all that's dumb. And this one it didn't feel that same way without those lines, I guess. Like you just do kind of get the sense that Superman is disoriented. He doesn't really remember what's going on and he's sort of acting on an instinct of being threatened and he snaps out of it, like more effortlessly, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It just didn't help keep it from feeling like, a fight scene to have a fight scene, because that would be cool to have a fight scene. I
Sure.
agree. It was cool to have a fight scene. But it's uh, it just didn't it didn't hit me right. But
Ooh, I wanted Diana to put up a better fight, but I'm also a Wonder Woman fangirl. I also wanted Diana to put up a better fight. Um, I kind of wanted, to be honest, a little bit more of that, just from like a. I think I'm the only person in the world who likes this, right? Like the sort of super huge blowout, you know, Superman versus Zod at the end of Man of Steel. Like that is I love that, and I would have loved to see something similar to that with Wonder Woman and Superman, who really can, kind of go toe to toe. Um, but what are you gonna do?
yeah. I also thought that, like, kind of in general, Aquaman was a little bit wasted in this film. Like, he gets good moments, but like most of the film happens in, like, or the big action scenes happen like in the middle of a park, or like in the middle of Russia near a power plant without like water in sight, right? So it feels like, he gets a couple of moments, but I feel like,
Interesting. I actually think Aquaman's moments in this are a little bit ruined because there's not a lot of new stuff. He stabs Steppenwolf through the fucking chest.
yeah, sure,
That was sweet. Like, I don't know that there is a moment in a movie that is more perfectly aligned for me. Like, this has happened to me in multiple D&D games, in like RP, I'm like WoW RP. My favorite thing to do with a character is to like stab someone through the back and have the blade like burst out their chest. I always write that into my into my shit. So it felt like I was being spoken to. It's like, hey buddy, we know your favorite fucking character is Aquaman. He's also gonna do your favorite fucking move. But I think that the cool stuff that he does was like, it's like riding, surfing on the parademon, the my man moment. All that stuff is in the theatrical cut. Whereas it felt like everybody else had moments that were cut from the theatrical cut. Cyborg does the thing where he collapses the two buildings. Batman has this whole interaction with like scaling the tower and shooting the parademon like defense gun. Wonder Woman had a much better fight scene with Steppenwolf this time around. Aquaman also did, but that was kind of a combo attacks thing. Like I like them using the pitchfork as a tuning fork. Cyborg shoots it with his sonic gun, and it like creates
yeah,
the blast or whatever.
yeah. I think my point is more like, we don't get a lot from Aquaman that's like uniquely Aquaman, right? Like
Oh sure, yeah.
we he's like a strong dude with a weapon, and it's a unique weapon, and I think he gets like one, like, kind of like, sonar attack, like he hits someone like with the broadside of it, and it like does like a shockwave or something. But like,
Yeah,
he,
especially because the fight scene in Atlantis has expanded.
yeah,
That fight scene is also in the theatrical cut, but it's much shorter. And you would think that, like, in the world where he can, in his environment where he could summon a fucking whale to smack, I don't know, Steppenwolf with its fin. I don't know. I'm
yeah.
not I'm not that guy, but that he would have done something like that. I will say though, the person who got the coolest moment for in there was Mira sucking
Oh yeah,
Steppenwolf's
yeah.
blood out with her hydrokinesis. Holy fuck!
That was
I
fun.
was watching that part with Rachel, and Mira is Rachel's favorite character. And we both were just like, because she says like a line, like she's getting choked down. I'm like, this is kind of like a bitch moment for Mira, and then she like says a line and starts like sucking, and we were both like, oh shit, fuck, like.
Yeah, no, that was it was great. I liked Aquaman's stuff underwater a lot. Except for
Mhm.
he kind of like glides through the water, and all I could think of was like, he's just like farting, and that's what's propelling him through the water, because like he doesn't like move his arms or body at all. He just kind of like goes, and there's bubbles around him. But that's
Mhm.
I don't know how that's supposed to work, but I also
I think
appreciate that
part
little.
of that is a small thing that I think is different in the action scenes, and this is one of the things that I like about Snyder in general, is that he puts these impact marks. If somebody punches somebody else and they hit something, they don't bounce off it; they crater into it.
Mm,
And you get like the cracks in the stone, and it's everybody, right? Including, by the way, the Flash, who like theoretically, if he is getting hit hard enough by someone to like make a big, DBZ crater, you would think he'd be dead, but whatever. And I think that that's something that was missing in the theatrical cut, but it's part of what makes Zack Snyder's filmmaking feel more visceral, right? Is like they're getting kind of like demolished through uh the terrain in a way. that just like is really brutal.
Yeah, and there's often blood left behind, right? Like it wasn't with
Yeah.
Aquaman, but with one of the Aqua Scouts or whatever they were. Like,
Yeah, adding the blood was a nice touch. I absolutely agree. Like the moment, I mean, this is part of what I like about that Amazon fight scene. Like Steppenwolf is straight up killing people, right? Like he hits you with his axe, and there's a big ass spray of blood, which makes sense. It's an axe. It's an axe that can cut through anything according to like the lore,
except for
right?
Superman.
So you would expect that it's gonna leave big gouts of blood as it like cuts people's heads off and shit.
Yeah, no, I mean it it's a little bit more mature, and that's a good thing. That's a good way to differentiate it from the MCU movies. Let's say
Yeah.
that's the way to put it. Um,
Definitely not rated PG-13 though,
mhm.
which is maybe I guess I would say you couldn't have released this. Like some people have said like it's crazy that Warner Brothers like didn't release this, and I almost sort of think if this had been released, like let's say Zack Snyder stayed on the whole time and he released this movie, right? Even a shorter version of this movie, I still think it would have been shit on at the time.
I think I agree with
Just
you.
because like there was a hate boner for Zack Snyder. It was 2017. We were, and also crucially, we were in a pre 2018 Marvel space. Marvel hadn't really fucked anything up yet. You know, like we hadn't had Captain Marvel yet. We hadn't really seen like Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, which people were more negative on compared to some of like their other movies. I also think that those movies sort of shifted the tone of superhero movies away from the very like quips,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um,
but yeah,
and that if this had come out in 2017, we might not have had that.
no, I absolutely agree. Like I remember when we were talking about BVS, right? I remember like articles being like there was an article in GQ, I think that was like Batman vs Superman made me hate superhero movies, right? And it's like people are giving it like two. So like this is not a great movie. Like obviously you like BVS better than I do, but like I didn't think BVS was a
Mhm.
great movie. But I didn't think it was so bad that people needed to like fucking lose their shit over it like they did. And I feel like that was absolutely carried forward into Justice League
Yeah,
in the
like
same
I
way.
think that I think it was a tonal problem, right? Like the tone of the zeitgeist at that moment was very different than it is now, right?
Mhm.
Like in a post Thanos world where Thanos is really like doing some brutal, like brutal shit. I think people would be kind of more willing to sort of accept a Justice League of this kind of like caliber. I also think that in a certain sense, we had it like maybe actually the real litmus test for this would have been the Last Jedi, which might have been a turning point in terms of the bathos humor, right? Like bathos humor is on the rise, and then the Last Jedi hits, and all of a sudden people really turn against it. Which I don't know that I really would want to like stake that claim, but I feel like it's kind of like in there and sort of around there.
Yeah, I'd buy that it's at least a contributing factor.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Oh,
but that's interesting.
I also want to say I really liked. So this is Nick in the chat. I really liked Ares going
Yeah,
ham
no,
on
I
Dark
wanted to
Side.
talk about this too.
Zeus and Ares kicked his ass. Yeah.
This Golden Age fight, I thought was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I was gonna point that out too. We should talk about this a little bit.
Yeah,
I actually,
people said that that moment I think was really great, and I would have kept every frame. It was so cool to have the whole thing kind of end over, and even with like like the Red Letter Media guys made fun of like Gal Gadot giving this voiceover. I did not have that. I was very invested because I thought it was so sweet. Darkseid owning the shit out of a Green Lantern and then watching the Green Lantern ring slide off his finger and go find another, because that's how the Green Lantern rings work. That was fucking sweet.
no, I agree.
Like,
I agree. I was like maybe it could have even it's like a touch more exposition as to like what exactly was happening, right? Because like it took me a couple seconds to figure out like that was supposed to be Zeus and Ares, right? Like or like what exactly was happening, right? And like I wrote a little thing too. Like I didn't think Zeus and Ares like their models looked great. Like it felt like
mhm.
they were not quite there, which I assume is kind of a thing that was like maybe they didn't get the same love and tender loving care that the rest of them did because they were like kind of like an extra thing, right? That was all brought back in. They weren't in the original cut, right? Like
I think they were, but just for a couple of frames,
yeah,
because in the original cut there was no mention of Darkseid, which is a
right,
big thing, obviously. Um,
yeah,
but because I think actually also technically the Green Lantern was there, but he's just there as part of the overture of the
right.
battle, right? Like flying in. He doesn't have that whole fight scene with Darkseid where Darkseid kills him.
Yeah. Yeah. That Green Lantern, like I felt like I recognized that Green Lantern. Is that like a known
I
character?
don't. It might be a relation of Tomar 2, who is the Green Lantern from the sector just so we are in sector 2814, which is where Earth is, and like Hal Jordan, John Stewart, Guy Gardner, right? All the Earth Green Lanterns come from there. In the sector 2813 is where Tomar 2 comes from, who's kind of it's like an orange guy with a beak. And I didn't see the beak, but he was definitely kind of orange with like the frill or whatever. And I was like, is this a reference or is this just
So
random? I don't know.
yeah, I thought he might have been the one. Like he looked, and maybe it's me misremembering, but like the original Green Lantern, the one with the yellow weakness, um, like it looked like it might have been the alien that like it's like can't be the same one.
Oh, Abin Sur, who gives them. So Abin Sur is pink, not orange,
Okay.
but I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Like I might be misremembering. Like I said, it's been a while.
Yeah.
I read those comics like way back in the day. Like my library had a collection of like the original, like the Green Lantern #1 or whatever. So
Yeah, I
um,
mean, it's crazy to me that we haven't had a good like Green Lantern. The Green Lantern comics are famously amazing, especially in this time period, right? Like, kind of starting in 2003, going all the way, maybe for 10 years, right? Like that 10-year run of Green Lantern is phenomenally good. And we haven't had a good adaptation of it anywhere,
yeah,
which is
and
nuts to me.
like I don't think Ryan Reynolds is the right character for like a Green Lantern. Like I don't I
Oh my
don't have
god,
the
that
same
movie's so
connection.
bad.
But like even
You know what's
without, right?
actually
Like this.
pretty funny? Ooh, what's wrong with the Ryan Reynolds film? Everything, buddy. Fucking everything. Let me tell you. Um, I this movie has actually made me reevaluate some of the other DCEU movies. Like, I think better of Birds of Prey than when we reviewed it, and I worse of Wonder Woman 1984. Like at the time, I thought Wonder Woman 1984 was kind of like it was just kind of like a kids movie and it was this like lark and I couldn't get mad at it or whatever. But and I don't know why this is the case, but I saw someone do a ranking and I just kind of mentally was like, okay, where would I rank some of these movies? And I was like, man, I would rank Wonder Woman 1984 much worse now. Maybe because I've seen how cool Diana can be. Like her first fight scene with the thing where she was blocking all the bullets, that was sweet. That was awesome. Right? Like I don't know. It's just something about that like kind of changed my it sort of changed my framing in respect to some of these other movies.
Yeah, so so I agree that like her blocking the bullets was cool, but like that scene kind of like that scene was the type of scene where it's like, you're probably gonna call it nitpicky bullshit, but like there was just too much of it for me. Right? It's like they were going to blow the briefcase up and just take out 4 building, or it said take out a 4 block radius. Why did they put a timer on it? They weren't trying to escape, right? Why not just turn the key and have it explode immediately?
I would call that nitpicky bullshit, but you know what? Fair enough.
And and
Uh
there was like he also like takes a while to reload his gun, and Diana just kind of like waits for him to reload his gun before like she does stuff to it. Like that scene like didn't read great to me, but it was still neat. It was still cool, but like it's it
Yeah,
was
villains are definitely dumb in these movies. I do think that there's something about like the tone of this movie that sort of changed that in a way. Like part of my willingness to accept this version of Steppenwolf is just that like the tone is more mythic and like epic,
mm,
right? Like I here, the thing that makes Justice League work in a way that is different than the Avengers works is like the Avengers is sort of like a group of sort of like relatable, like these are like people that I understand on a very relatable level, right? This is a group of essentially humans interacting in superhuman scenarios and situations, right? The Justice League doesn't feel like that. The Justice League feels like a pantheon of gods, right? Who are, sort of representative of like bigger, just like I don't know, it's just bigger than that, right? Or almost more like Lord of the Rings in a way, which puts me in a different headspace when I'm watching these characters compared to the theatrical cut or like the Marvel movies, right? Which to be honest, I think is his credit, right? Like Grant Morrison, very famous Justice League writer who rebooted the Justice League in 1997. His whole thesis for his whole JLA run was these are gods who walk the earth and this is their pantheon, right? um And I think all that works just it really comes across in this movie in a way that I really enjoyed. Though I will say, and I said this at the front, I am a little disappointed that the movie isn't more like interesting or more complex in the way that Man of Steel and BVS were. Like those movies clearly had really interesting questions to sort of ask about the superhero genre in general, right? Specifically like things like to what extent does Clark owe the people of the world, a responsibility to help them, right? And at what point is he allowed to sort of like step away and keep his power to himself, where the and like there's really none of that stuff in here, mostly because the public is sort of a non-issue, right? Like the only real interactions we see is like in the introductory sequences for Diana, Aquaman, and the Flash, where like the Flash is saving people, Aquaman is obviously coming to this village or whatever, Diana's like, talks to that little schoolgirl or whatever. But for the most part, like this movie doesn't really care all that much about like
Yeah,
the civilian populace and how they interact with
they
superheroes.
stripped the civilians out of the Russia area,
Oh,
right?
thank God, that was the worst. I fucking
It
hated that.
was,
But
but like I think the Red Letter Media guys pointed
yeah,
out that like like the Zack Snyder doesn't care about people. Like it's like a story beat, which I think is fair and it's fine. But like I think it definitely plays into that like superheroes or gods type of framing, which is a different framing than Marvel. Like Marvel is very much like superheroes or people, um, just like you and me type of deal in a lot of ways. They also have a lot more heroes that work like that, right? Like,
hmm
um, like like there's no like Ant-Man or Falcon in at least in the Justice League. I don't know if there are in kind of like the comics just like
yeah. This is
there's
sort of what I
Batman,
what I
but he's
liked about. This is why I was remembering Birds of Prey a little bit better, because in a certain sense, Birds of Prey does sort of remind me. I just sort of liked. I don't know. I had that thought where I was like, where would I rank some of these movies? And and the thing that's nice about Birds of Prey is that it doesn't deal with any of this like grandiose shit, right? It's just about a gangster in a corrupt city, like in a corrupt city, and a group of ladies go and kick his butt. And I just think there's something nice about the simplicity of that. Shazam is also sort of in that same sort of spot, where it's just sort of like a very simple, straightforward, but also pretty small story. It's very contained compared to sort of the massive globe hopping super serious adventures of like of the wider Justice League.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I still don't like Birds of Prey, so there's that. Uh, but I take your point. I take your point. I guess. Um,
It did also make me like Aquaman much better, because this feels like a real companion piece. In a certain sense, it feels like Aquaman is in a different universe, like cinematic universe, than some of these other DC universe, but it is absolutely in this one. Like
yeah, yeah.
there is a very direct through line between the final battle in Aquaman and that prologue sequence for like Darkseid attacking the Earth 5,000 years ago. Um, that like connected those dots a little bit better.
Is there any like so? Is there anything that like does everything like work out kosher between those two movies? Because like things seemed a little jumbled in my mind. Like, um,
I think the only weird thing is that in Aquaman, everybody has very slicked back hair compared to in Justice League. In Justice League, Volko has these long flowing locks. But one of the things, and my understanding is this is a technical concern, because what they do when they film the underwater sequences, they just kind of like put you on wires and you just mime swimming, and then they like fill in around you water with CGI, right? Um, which means that you have to CGI their hair. So like all of Aquaman's hair in this was CGI'd. And I think that they just didn't want to have to do that for characters in like Orm has a very slim, sleek haircut. Volko has a very sleek haircut in Aquaman. I do think everything works out technically correctly, except for maybe the armor of the troops, because like we see what Atlantean soldiers are wearing when they're protecting the mother box, and it's not the same as what the Atlantean soldiers are wearing in Aquaman, because they have those like white bodysuits or whatever. um I don't know.
yeah.
I mean, well, actually, I guess that's not even true, because when Arthur fights Orm in Aquaman, he wears that golden brass sort of armor that the the guards are wearing. So I guess that armor does exist. Maybe it's just, I don't know, outdated or something. Yeah, I guess it works out pretty well. I think my favorite thing actually is that when he first talks to Mira, he is looking at the armor that he will later, the armor and the trident that he will later inherit as part of his, sort of Excalibur moment character arc in Aquaman, which was very neat. I remember thinking at the time, like, I like the five fork trident, or the quindent, I guess. That's actually more comics accurate. In the comics, his trident is technically a quindent. Um, though it changes. The artists all draw it their own fucking way. But there's something about the, I don't know. There's something about the world building production design that I think probably wasn't super ironed out between the two films.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. What
I get.
else?
We need to talk about We need to talk about the crazy ending.
Oh yes, yes,
You
we do.
said that it would work better as a post credit scenes. I absolutely agree. I was sitting there like, what the fuck? Because this is clearly a sequel tease, but for, I guess, a movie that's never going to get made. Maybe
Yeah,
it is. Are they going to announce Are they going to announce a restore the Snyderverse?
yeah. I was gonna say, was this like Zack Snyder going for broke? It's like, doesn't,
I,
this is my last chance.
I would love that. I would go ape shit for that. I mean, honestly, not even with him at the helm. I think there's a version of things where they restore the continuity of the Snyderverse, but with other directors. That's fine. I like Jason Momoa in continuity with, like Gal Gadot, obviously. I love Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck as Batman in this is better than Ben Affleck and Batman vs Superman, and I think he's the best on-screen Batman we have ever had. There's something about, I don't know. There's just something about
Better than Dark Knight Batman.
yeah, I mean, I like, I have the controversially, I guess. I don't think that those are very like true Batman. I actually think Ben Affleck's murdering Batman and Batman v Superman is more comics accurate than the Christian Bale Batman, which is uh that's maybe the hottest take. There's your hot take, Phelan Art. Have fun. Like, just because Christian Bale is, he's sort of, he's so divorced from a lot of the root stuff in the comics, right? Like there's no Robin, there's no kind of interaction with like bigger, crazier stuff than that. I don't know, there's just something about like the heightened reality of the BVS version of Batman, right? Um, that feels more true to Batman in the comics that I know and read. Than the low fantasy, in a sense, version of Christian Bale's Batman. Does that make sense?
It does to me. Yeah, yeah. I think Ben Affleck might be the best Bruce Wayne, but I
I also think the action is really bad in those movies, which is part of it.
yeah. So the funny thing is, like I said, I've read a lot of the older comics, and for that
Hmm.
reason, I like Adam West best as the best on-screen Batman.
You know what? Honestly, that's fair enough. And that's a very real thing though. Like, it is a lot of the era that you read. Like, something I think that's maybe a little bit unique to my flavor of comics reading is that the comics that I read would, in what we would call the modern era, right? Like kind of starting in the late 90s, 2000s, right? Those comics are fucking brutal. So like for instance, I saw a tweet with like a million likes and I hated this. I saw a tweet that was just like, in Zack Snyder's Justice League, uh the Justice League works together to disembowel and chop Steppenwolf's head off in a rated R, like movie for like kids or whatever. And I'm like, honestly, the comics I read are more graphic than that in a lot of situations, right? Like, that is very accurate as far as I'm concerned, right? Like in the like, I don't want to say like in the comic stuff with Steppenwolf is whatever, but like, Kyle Rayner, who's Green Lantern, shoots a bunch of green arrows on fire and permanently mutilates Sinestro's back so that he has a gigantic burn scar in the shape of a Green Lantern sigil or whatever. Dude, Aquaman's fucking hand gets cut off for like a decade. He is just lacking a hand because it got cut off by a villain forcing him to put it in a pool of like murderous piranhas. I know that sounds dumb, but in the comics it's fucking
Which villain is
brutal.
this?
That's not, it's not in the film. That's in
No, I
like
said which villain.
villain. The villain is called Charybdis,
Okay.
who is it's like he's named after like the ancient whirlpool that like kills a bunch of people in like the Odyssey or something like that. Anyway, what he does is he can also control fish, and he just like mind controls Aquaman, forces him to put his head in the thing, and then the piranhas eat his fucking hand. Like that stuff feels comics accurate to me. Brutal shit happens in the comics all the time.
Doesn't Black
Steppenwolf's head
Manta
getting cut off is sweet.
doesn't Black Manta kill Aquaman's son?
Yeah, Black Manta kills Aquaman's kid, a baby. And that isn't even from the modern era. That's from the 70s, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, he butchers people. Black Manta is like basically a serial killer. One of his main motifs in the comics is that he like guts fish. So he uses these like knives. Like in one of the most recent comics, like in 2013, they did a series called Forever Evil, where like evil versions of the Justice League come over. And the villains all get together to kill those versions of the Justice League. Captain Cold, who shoots like the cold gun, is the Flash's like main nemesis in a lot of situations. And he finds the evil version of Flash, freezes one of his legs, and then kicks it so that the ice that his leg has turned into shatters. And it's like astoundingly brutal. So I think that stuff is very in line with the comics, and it's not at all right. Like the sort of PG-13 violence, I feel like is a fiction of the movies, I guess, and not true to sort of like the comics that I know of, I guess.
That's very fair, I
Plus, it was
guess.
sweet to see Steppenwolf's head
Yeah.
get fucking
No,
cut off, right?
I will.
Like,
So like the head getting cut off was like cool, and like the way like it was very kind of like cool and cinematic the way like it like goes under Darkseid's foot. But like the thing that like really got me was like Batman just like showing up being like ha ha ha, destroying the action, like lasering off his horn, and like in like 3 seconds like no effort. Like Jesus fucking Christ, Clark. Like
yeah,
I thought it was
to
great,
be
but
honest, I love that. I thought that was fucking
yeah,
sweet.
no, it was.
And it's funny because in the that whole thing got completely rewritten in the theatrical cut. Um, but like in a certain sense, the theatrical cut is also weirdly more brutal than this because Steppenwolf actually gets his axe into Cyborg and like cuts Cyborg open or whatever, which is like I guess you're allowed to like disfigure him because he's a robot. I don't even know. Um,
So I want to point out that I will link this in the description, but Nick just linked the comic where Black Manta finds out that like I think it's that Aquaman's back, and he just like murders everybody and like walks into the sea.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like, how the fuck is like the blood in Justice League not worse than all of this blood? And this is also, I mean, there's a part that echoes the thing with the piranhas where Black Manta chops off. He is in a fist fight with Aquaman where he has two knives and he chops off one of Aquaman's hands, and it gets healed like later. But he's sitting there and he holds his hand and it's like red and bloody or whatever. And it's just like, dude, comics are fucking brutal.
Yeah, yeah, they absolutely yeah. Um, we should talk about this like non post credits scene though. Like because
Okay,
we
yeah, yeah,
gotta
yeah.
get away from it.
So they go back to the future universe,
We go back to
which
the
has
future with Doc Brown. You know,
yeah,
a hot second, I had to look up who Alfred was because I thought it was like the actor who played Doc Brown. Because that would have been funny.
where it is Batman, the Flash Cyborg,
Deathstroke.
Mira, who is using Arthur's trident, but like the good trident that he gets in the Aquaman movie, Deathstroke, and the Joker. And they're talking about how Superman is still evil and all of this other shit, and they need the Joker for something, and they have a whole interaction. I like that interaction a lot, though people are really overselling it. This is not the best like Batman Joker interaction ever. Please shut the fuck up about that.
He doesn't even
Um,
say we live in a society. They lied to us in the
he doesn't even
trailer.
say we live in a society. Yeah, we later learned that Jared Leto recorded that line for the trailer. Um, so I'm so depressed that we don't actually live in a society. And this happens at the end of the movie to set up that even though the Justice League has stopped Steppenwolf, the future that Batman dreamt in BVS is still a possibility. Like it's still coming for them because Darkseid is still out there or whatever. Okay, that's a sequel hook. it's a little fucking weird. And then Martian Manhunter shows up and it's like, hey, by the way, put me in your sequel, please. Thanks. See you later, bud.
He also shows up
Like,
randomly in the middle of the fucking movie, like, which is like
so I actually don't think that that's random. So do you know the voice? Did you know the actor?
of Martian Manhunter. No,
Yeah, so that's General Swanwick. But I think people miss this just because they don't know the continuity of the DCEU movies that well. That's General Swanwick. In Man of Steel, he's like the black general who is like talking to, like he's like the person that orders Superman to be like detained or whatever. He is the same character, and he has a rapport with Lois Lane. He's the one in BVS in the Ultimate Edition where when she's looking into the bullet to prove that Lex Luthor is the one who like framed Superman for all of the dead bodies in Africa, he's the one who gives her that information. So like that moment makes sense, but it only makes sense if you understand that wider continuity, right? Like this is General Swanwick who has a personal relationship with Lois Lane, keeping up with Lois Lane and keeping tabs on her, right?
yeah, like
Um,
why why did you do it as Martha, right?
I
Like
don't know.
yeah, like that was the thing, right? It's like I was like, is this gonna come out in like in the cornfield? Is like Martha gonna be like, oh,
Okay, I actually, you know what? Now that you put it that way, I guess I see it. That is sort of weird, because at the time, yeah, that's interesting. At the time, that was my thought. I was like, oh, like General Swanwick, Lois Lane obviously know each other, and he's just like keeping up. I didn't really think about it that
yeah,
more
I
than
mean,
that,
it's like
but
because now that you put it that way, it makes even less sense because like he could have showed up as General Swanwick and
as General Swanwick, yeah, it's exactly my thought. So don't know what that's about.
yeah, yeah, but I mean, but yes, that whole ending sequence was like, what the fuck, right? Like if it's
Yeah.
Injustice, that's cool, right? Like Lois Lane dies, right? That's like
Mhm.
did you played Injustice, right? Like
Yep.
the yeah, you know,
It is
um,
also very famous. That's just like a famous thing. Like Lois Lane dies. Sometimes as Superman changes, like in the Kingdom Come version of Superman, he just retires. Um, like the Joker kills. So what happens is the Joker kills Lois Lane, and another superhero murders the Joker for it, and Superman takes him to court and is like, "You murdered a guy, you should go to jail." And the court upholds that because the Joker was such a crazy menace to whatever and was like killing people, that actually the superhero who murdered the guy was is not guilty. And then Superman leaves. He goes to the Fortress of Solitude, and he does not return to human society for 10 years. But yeah, so like that's a pretty common thing in the Injustice universe. It is just the Joker murders Lois Lane, and Superman becomes a bad boy for
well,
it.
Superman murders him back, like Superman kills the
Yeah.
Joker, right? And you know, and becomes a tyrant. And Lex Luthor is good in that universe, so he makes
Yep.
super pills so that the Joker from our universe or from the first universe come over and like do Mortal Kombat,
And also,
because it's a plot of
Batman
a
is
video
good,
game.
right?
Uh, so everybody, so the people in the Injustice universe, like Lex Luthor and Batman, I think are working together.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like the only one that does like a real switch is Lex. And
Because
then
there's a couple of people who are still members of the Justice League. Like I think Diana, the Flash, maybe Cyborg, are all still working with Superman as part of the
yeah,
Justice League,
yeah,
being tyrants essentially.
yeah, and then and like people come over from the Earth, like the prime, like it's the other video game because like if I remember correctly, it's not the Earth 2 or whatever the prime one is. Like it's the prime video game universe which has its own number, and they go into a different video game universe because nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they also are throwing back to the old Justice League cartoon show, which had this also same plot point. Which is Lex Luthor leads to Lois Lane's death, and then Superman uses his heat vision to lobotomize Lex Luthor, and the Justice League take over the world. So evil Superman is still in some sort of cards, and I guess theoretically, if we have a Justice League 2, mind blowing as that might be, that would be
yeah,
like where we go.
and Joker pretty explicitly makes it about like talks about alternate universes, right? So like you don't have to do exactly this is it. Like you could do like a kind of like Doctor Strange esque, right? Like I've seen all possible futures type of stuff, right? Like
Yeah, so my thinking is that this seems to suggest that like the thing that is no longer a plot hole, like for instance, in Batman vs Superman, when the Flash comes back and he says like I'm too soon, it's Lois, right? Um, that is theoretically a plot hole in the theatrical version of Justice League. it just doesn't connect to anything and is completely unrelated. This puts a little more context to it, but doesn't actually like fill the plot hole because we don't really know what the Flash is like going back in time to do or like warn anybody about. But the greater picture is just that just because Steppenwolf is defeated doesn't mean that Darkseid is, like a neutralized threat, and that future is still a possibility. So like it's a sequel hook.
Yeah.
Um I don't know.
They go
And
hook
then
into
there's
what? Who knows?
yeah, and then there's also like that Martian Manhunter scene. So I think those scenes are honestly pretty bad. They're bad. They're just, I don't know, they're bad scenes. I guess Zack Snyder just doesn't like post-credit sequences because he hasn't had them in any of these movies so far. As post-credit scenes, I think they would have been okay. Um,
Not held to the same standard.
not held to the same standard, I guess. And it also feels like you can do some like weird shit there without, like just the fact that it is in a post-credit scene kind of signals we're bridging the gap, like this is the breadcrumb to the next
Yeah,
movie
yeah.
sort of thing, which just putting something at the end of the movie doesn't quite do. It's like in the spot of a denouement where it's not actually like doing that. Also, I guess technically this movie has three of them because there's also the Lex Luthor Deathstroke scene, which is, by the way, simultaneously way cooler and also way lamer, and I'm really sad about it because if you remember the theatrical cut, Lex Luthor is like, I'm putting together the Injustice League, which I think would be a fucking sweet idea because in almost all of these movies the bad guy never actually dies and you can bring him back, which is unlike the Marvel movies where they're all fucking dead, right? Like you can never really like bring back an old villain because they all tend to like blow up and stuff like that. But you could do an Injustice League movie where you have Dr. Savannah, where you have Orm from Aquaman, where you have Ares, where you have Lex Luthor, and where you have Deathstroke, and like there's your Injustice League. And I love the Injustice League or the Secret Society of Supervillains. They're called a number of different things, right? The Legion of Doom is obviously like another version of them, and that is completely awesome unexplored space that the Marvel movies have never done. Black Manta also easy inclusion in those. Um, I guess technically you could do Cheetah. Oh, that would suck. Uh, you could do maybe some people from Suicide Squad get back Will Smith as Deadshot,
Hmm.
who I miss dearly. You could I guess they're doing the new Suicide Squad, so maybe some people out of the James Gunn Suicide Squad. Anyway, I don't know. I loved that as a teaser. The thing where Lex Luthor tells Deathstroke that Bruce Wayne is Batman is cool, and I like that a lot. But it feels very limp because we're not getting that movie, right? When
Yeah.
when it was the Ben Affleck directed Batman movie, that script was Batman versus Deathstroke, which I thought was cool. That's a sweet fucking concept. But now we're doing Robert Pattinson, so
Did you see that? Like, apparently, they put like a symbol on Deathstroke's back. That's like a
mhm.
halo symbol. Um, and apparently, what happened is like if you Google Raja Ghul symbol, it's like from a fan fiction that somebody wrote, and they use the halo, like this halo emblem from like the Halo games in it. Um, that was like being memed over the internet. A couple of yeah, it's Sword Hill. Nick points out it was on a Sword Hill. That it was a thing that people were
Oh.
clowning on the internet for a couple of days. So that's just fun. Like this is the type of thing where like somebody's like needs to like make like set dressing for Deathstroke and like Google's something like this happens in a couple different like there are stories about this happening in a couple different places since it's not like the prop person's like some like expert on Raja Ghul symbology, right? So yeah. um
Wow.
yeah.
This is funny. I did not see this, but that's cool.
So yeah, we're about at the end of our or we're over time
Yeah,
for
we
Ms.
are over time, but it's
um
it's
we are
good
getting
shit.
the Flash movie that Zack Snyder's a producer on, right?
Correct. I mean, he
Yeah.
was also a producer. He's a producer of all these movies. Like he produced Aquaman, Wonder Woman. I don't think the Shazam movies, but or like Birds of Prey, but um,
Well, maybe we'll see something else, but time will tell.
yeah.
Time will
Time
tell.
will tell. I mean, this has been pretty huge. I thought that this was going to just be a like a corner of the internet thing, but it has really blown up. It seems like everybody over the weekend, right, like was getting and watching Justice League. And honestly, I think my favorite part about that is that the movie is well liked and well reviewed. Like this is Zack Snyder's best reviewed movie. Um, And by and large, most of the feedback has been positive that I've seen, right? Um, but there's still a section of like film Twitter that just hates Zack Snyder so fucking much that they hate the movie and they think it's bad. But it's like the hilarious reversal in a way, because so for years I've been following these two groups, right? You have the Snyder Cut people who are constantly saying Zack Snyder's a genius, I love all of his stuff, and these people are getting dunked on constantly because everybody hates Zack Snyder movies. And part of the people doing the dunking are like the film Twitter people who like really hate Zack Snyder and are like going like hard. But now it's sort of the opposite, right? Like the Snyder Cut people are sort of vindicated. And like, the people who like make their career in a way, not that's overstating the case, but they are the ones who are sort of like against the public perception and the public opinion because this is a pretty enjoyed movie, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I don't know. I thought like I kind of just like it's like a final takeaway. I want to say that like I think the kind of whole arc of the movie was good, and I had a lot of problems with little details as we've kind of talked about, and I griped a little bit about, but like it's interesting to see it go that way because like I think a lot of the devil is in those details, and like
Hmm.
I said, I think it's like an okay movie, not a great movie, 6 to 7. And you I think you're a little bit more positive, but you're kind of in the same. So it's interesting to see it go that way.
Yeah,
Um,
I definitely agree.
yeah.
Um. Anyway, how was your week? Tell me all about it.
Uh, it was all right. I what did I do? I played a little bit of WoW. Oh, so I did dip my toes into the Crusader Kings 3 pack, the culture pack.
Northern Lords.
Yeah, yeah. So for those that don't know, they just dropped a culture pack. The Norse gets a bunch of features like you can sacrifice Christians for piety, and like a blood mood or something. I forget what it's called. Like gods. You do a big festival, and then you can designate someone to be like your happy sappy super sacrifice. And if it's like not a Norse person, it's great. Um, and you can also sacrifice like people for piety too. I think that might have been the base game because like the Norse are like, yeah, sacrifice people, who cares. um I played as Iceland for a bit. I was fooling around with some of the new features include like you can declare a war if you're a count or a duke. You can declare a war to capture a duchy far away, and you just take that over. But you lose your old holdings, and you become like you just switch places with them. Essentially, it's not switch places because they like people take over your old stuff, but like you can just take a duchy on like the shore. I was lining up to do that, but I never got to it, and then I became a king, so I couldn't do it anymore. But it looked neat. I was gonna like, and apparently you generate a bunch of soldiers. I was gonna go. I was thinking about maybe trying to take over Brittany, but like the thing that like doesn't work super well is like, or the thing that I think that doesn't come across super well is that like a lot of the places are either like not far away to be interesting, at least for Iceland, because I chose to play as
Hmm.
Iceland. Like doing this swap with like Ireland would not be super interesting. Like I said, I was thinking of doing Brittany, and you can't go for you could I couldn't do it with Spain. They were too far away for them to be diplomatically cognizable or whatever, um, diplomatically interactable.
That's
Um,
interesting. That kind of reminds me of Hearts of Iron, where like most of the expansions aren't really about affecting the core gameplay. Like if you were to start up Hearts of Iron and play the United States now, it'd be pretty similar to playing it at like launch. But what they do is when they release new stuff, it's just like these small bits of the world where it's like, hey man, if you want to play New Zealand, we've got you, right? Like,
Yeah, no, and they've said that like this is a culture pack. It's supposed to be a little bit smaller in scale, right? Like the big
mm,
system changes will come with the expansions. This is mostly about like highlighting and tweaking the Norse stuff, which is neat. Of course they're going to do the Norse first because they are like basically Viking. They're like the descendants of Vikings out in wherever they aren't they based in like Stockholm or something like that.
maybe I don't know the details, to be honest.
They're very Scandinavian. If you watch any of their streams, they're like Jorgen, 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 which
Yeah, they might be Stockholm. They might be Oslo.
yeah,
I
yeah,
do know that they are. I do know that they are in, Scandinavia somewhere.
yeah.
Um,
I'll look this up real quick.
oh, it is
Stockholm.
Stockholm.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay.
Uh, Thanks for fact checking us. We love our
Yeah.
audience. Uh, um, but yeah. So otherwise, I just played some WoW, right? Like I didn't really do anything deep. I just raided, so you were there too. So
We got Sludge Fist. Hey
we
man, that
did,
was
we
sweet.
got Sludgefest. That felt really great.
It
That
is
felt really
remarkable how much my DPS improves when I'm not chained.
yeah.
Like
Oh yeah. Like you just don't have to like think about it either. Like I
I
can
had
be
on our
stupid.
final pull, I wasn't. No, I was chained once of the 4 chains that go out. So it was just like I felt free as a fucking bird. You could do all these dumb tricks like heroic leaping out, and then charging back in to get extra globals on the boss. Like, I love that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it was good. It felt real good. It felt real good to knock that down. And then also generals went okay. We didn't get it down, but it felt very doable, which is good.
Yeah. It's like starting. It's the start of progression. I feel like it's gonna be easier than Sludge Fist. Like Sludge Fist was just so punishing for melee,
Yeah, yeah.
and our whole raid is like so melee stacked.
And to be
Like
fair, a lot of
honestly,
go on. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
honestly, like part of it I think is just that we had a couple of people from our melee core, not like Savadar wasn't there, for instance, and we had a couple of people who don't normally make Thursdays in our ranged core show up, like Bella, who does like big boy big boy damage on Hunter, and I think that was it, right? Like just having the right spread of melee and ranged is really what was able to sort of push us over the line. Also, marking the one person and following the one person seemed to be a
Yeah.
huge improvement.
Well, I think the big one was actually like figuring out how to position Sludge Fist on like that third pillar
Yeah.
so that we had room to maneuver, right? Because like we were like running into corners and like that like I got hit by like over the course of our runs, I got hit by a lot of boulders just because like I couldn't see them super well, and like I think
Mm.
that like I feel like in the last one I got hit maybe by 1 or 0, and I feel like just like the ability to move around and like see things better super helped with that. So
Yeah,
uh,
I feel that for sure. I almost sort of wish that they would put debuffs on you that signal you're gonna get hit. Like, imagine the pillar zone. Imagine that does like a small amount of damage. Because something that happened to me constantly was I thought I was outside of the ring, and then I would get crushed
mm,
and stunned by the pillar. And I was like, man, this fucking sucks.
that or like a DBM yell or something, but
Yeah,
that
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's obviously third party. That's actually an interesting thing to maybe talk about a little bit. Like, it feels like some sort of DBM or DBM equivalent is like necessary in order to get like in order to do these raids. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important in like I don't think someone running the base client could perform at very high levels. Like WoW has such a symbiotic relationship with its add-ons. Um, like I think about like weak auras, right? Like weak auras are huge for my ability just to like visually track everything that's going on. And WoW sort of as a game has expanded into that space, right? As if it's part of the core design of the game, but it's not. It's like I guess it is in a sense that they have a very customizable API that you can use, um, but the game itself, it feels like it would be impossible to clear like heroic Castle Denathria without a single add-on. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, and like I think you could maybe get away without weak auras, right? Because weak auras is just kind of like moving stuff around, right? But like even then, like it's it's kind of curious maybe that like the game's basically like you they're basically mandatory for some sorts of
Yeah.
content.
And it's funny how like better and easier. I think an interesting thing about WoW is like that it trivializes certain kinds of things. So for instance, there's an add-on called Decursive that tracks when someone gets a debuff that you can strip from them, right? So if you have like a purge, like you can get rid of their curse or whatever, it'll give you an alert and say, hey, you can purge this or whatever. And I kind of removes the thought that has to go into those mechanics in a way, right? Like it's not like you need to practice the dungeon and see, oh, here is the cast that the boss does. This is gonna nuke someone. I need to strip this debuff from them ASAP, right? You just kind of let the add-on make those decisions for you, which sort of sucks in a way, to be honest.
Yeah, I like the silliest version of this I think was like back in Battle for Azeroth there was like a world quest where like the barrels would jump around and like at some point DBM added
Oh
like
my
they
God,
would check
Legion, yeah.
Oh, Legion, right? Like would track the barrels hopping around for you, so you didn't have to think about it, which is kind of like, I guess, right? Like, I
I
don't know.
mean, I'll be honest with you. I used that add-on. I had it. It was like,
Well, yeah,
and I had a sort of moral objection at the same time that I just accepted it.
yeah,
I
right. Like,
guess.
you know, I'm not gonna turn it off, right? Like, you know, and there's like, you know, I get it sometimes, right? Like, there's a level of like, well, I've done this world because like 40 times. Do I really need to fucking do it again, right? Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
um,
Yeah, and it's also sort of like, especially when you're playing at like an insanely, like when I'm pushing in high mythics or in like heroic raid, it's just like so different than like the world. Like world content is not challenging ever, or it's like a little bit challenging in the Maw sometimes because like the Maw has those extra mechanics, but like for the most part, I just don't have any sort of I just don't have any sort of trouble ever in like world quest content, which is kind of the point. That feels good to me, right? Like I remember what it was like doing world quests when I was not geared at all, and it was hard, and things were chunking me, and I grew out of that because I put 70 eye levels between that point in time and this point in time. Um, but I don't know.
yeah. I mean, that's the way it goes, I suppose. What have you
Yeah, I
been up
mean,
to
see,
this
Lou in
week?
chat says, I adore
Okay.
decursive. I have enough shit to manage without looking for tiny debuff icons and adding yet another hotkey. I healed without decursive this weekend and it was miserable. I mean, yeah, fair enough, right? Like, I don't know what I think is like, where is the line between those sorts of like mechanics and
Yeah, because
the,
right, because like I don't think WoW is for the most part a game about mechanical execution, right? Like it's about like decision making, right, and like quick decision
yeah,
making. I guess that like, you know, deciding what to put on cooldown and like who to prioritize and like whether you can spend the mana efficiently is the bigger decision there. And so that in that frame, using it makes like more sense to me. Um, I don't know. I don't heal, so I can't give too much
yeah.
opinion,
I
but that
mean,
makes sense
I
to
don't
me.
heal. I don't heal either. So it is the, like it's the world we live in. I feel like it's something that like where does it matter and where does it not matter, because there are definitely some mechanics in the game that I completely ignore essentially, um just because they're so ingrained in my, like, I have never in my life, I'm trying to think of a simple mechanic that like I have failed on like a boss or something like that. Like I have never in my life been hit by the AoE damage that happens at the last boss of Halls of Atonement. He does a big pool and he does a big cone, right? And he telegraphs it really obvious, and it's like that those mechanics are just so easy to deal with that like getting hit by one, I'm first of all I'm sure I'd be one shot, but just getting hit by one is like completely outside of the like my scope of understanding, right? Like when I'm thinking about that boss on a mechanical level, all that stuff is taken for granted. And I think in a certain sense, like the same thing could be said for like, dispels and shit like that. But like it would bother me in a way, right? Like if I'm working, like if I'm playing at a very high level and somebody else were to also be playing at that level, but like they were using an add-on that trivialized a piece of the package of like the fight. And so as a healer, I can't really say whether or not decursive like falls into that category. But like imagine an add-on that tells you to push your cooldown, right? That like reads the situation in the room and says, oh, you should Bladestorm here. And it sort of removes that decision. I don't get to choose when Bladestorm is up. I have an add-on that chooses for me, right? Um, I think that
Just
that
hit the
would be
button on
bad.
GCD and the add-on chooses which one it should be for you.
Yeah, well, because like like I mean, I think there's a version of this like a medium level player is someone who, okay, maybe there's a couple levels of this. A low level player is not hitting Bladestorm at all. Let's say that. A medium level player is hitting Bladestorm when they like are thinking about high burst damage. They're not hitting it on cooldown. A sort of high-ish level player is someone who is hitting it every time it's up. If Bladestorm is up, they're hitting it, which is technically correct, right? Like if I'm in a mythic, you don't hold your cooldowns, blow your cooldowns on whatever it is, because like having more instances over the course of a 40-minute period is better than having it in the right instances in a lot of situations. But a very very high level player will know there are sometimes a 5 or a 10-second window where you want to hold, right? And like there are really intricate interactions there, and I like that stratification is very nice, right? And like I'm in that top level obviously because I played the class deeply and I understand it well and I understand the dungeons well. And so I'll know, you know what, I'm actually not going to blow Bladestorm here because I know that the next pack, which we're going to be on in 20 seconds, is a great pack to Bladestorm. And that will technically, like, those sorts of decisions are technically like inching me ahead, if
Yeah,
that
yeah,
makes sense.
you're
And
describing
I would be
like
very afraid of that. I'd be very afraid of that kind of going away with an add-on.
uh, that's like that's like the difference between like character mastery and like and encounter mastery, right? Like that
Yeah.
like the thing you're describing that in the highest level, it's like knowing the individual encounters rather than like because like that first thing is a thing you can do agnostic of what you're actually doing, right? It's just like hit Blade Storm whenever it comes up, right? Like so. But yeah,
Yeah, like Nick points out, this is not I think everybody who raids with us is raiding at this level because we were all talking, for instance, on Sludgefist, who has big damage windows, right, on the pillars. The high level player is holding for the correct damage window, right? And
but we learned
knowing
it
when
was
it
wrong to
makes
hold it
sense.
for that, right? Like that was part of the learning process, right? Is to
Well,
like
so at first we learned. At first I was holding all the time. Then I was not holding ever, and then I eventually ended up in this place where I was sometimes holding
hmm,
for like 10 or 15 seconds because somebody was like, "Oh, at this, you want to do it at this. It makes sense to hold for the second pillar or whatever." And I think that like those sorts of decisions are the high level decisions that we're kind of making.
right, yeah, and I think you're right, right? Like I feel like you even need that kind of like level of situational awareness to like reliably get through even normal, right? Like I feel like you can't
Mm,
like or at least some of your raid has to be right. Like I feel like you could drag some people through that weren't thinking about it, but like at least some of the people have to know what's up.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, like I mean, for most mythics, it makes sense to wait for a damage amp phase. For instance, like because mythic bosses take less time. A lot of the time, they'll only take a minute or two, so you don't really get 2 cycles of a cooldown, right? Like I need 3 minutes to get 2 blade storms off,
right,
which would hypothetically mean if a or so theoretically a minute and a half, right? So if a fight is going to go longer than a minute and a half, I can go 2 blade storms, one right at the top and then one at the very end. But most of the time, if I kill that boss in a minute and 15 seconds, right? It actually makes sense for me to take that blade storm and move it to the most opportune point in the boss fight. So for instance, on Kultharok, which is the typically third boss in Theater of Pain, Kultharok gives you a 30% damage amp when you do the draw soul. So I hold Blade Storm until she does the first draw soul. And if I'm selected in that draw soul, I Blade Storm at the end of it. In order to get like the 30% extra damage. Um, but like obviously if I'm not selected, I'll just probably blow it. And I think that like that's the kind of stuff that having a deep understanding both of the encounter and where your class falls in regards to it. By the way, speaking of all these mythics, I timed a bunch of mythics this week. We
Rats.
timed halls, mists. What did I had? I had Theater of Pain. I had Necrotic Wake last week, and so I did halls, mists, and Spires of Ascension. So I'm at 5 out of 8 for Keystone Master, which I'm very excited by. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah. Did you do
um,
anything else with your week?
did I do anything else with my week? I played a lot of Valheim. We're progressing in Valheim into silver, which is interesting. I made a base in plains, assuming that plains was like the biomes go meadow, black forest, swamp, plains, mountain. But it actually seems to be going meadow, black forest, swamp, mountain, plains. Because when you beat the swamp boss, it sends you to the mountains to go get silver. Um, and I'm just building. I have I built a little fort in the plains with the expectation that like as I sort of plant deeper roots, I will expand it into a much larger building project, which I'm excited to like get down for. But right now I'm just like on a silver expedition. Me and Rachel have been working on like going to a bunch of silver deposits that she discovered and mining them up and then carting them back for smelting purposes. um, the Valheim has quickly become a game that I can do that thing where I'm just sort of doing it on one screen and like doing something else on the other. The main thing I'm doing there is watching Hannibal. Have I told you that I've been watching Hannibal,
No.
the TV show? So there's some batshit insane fan drama that popped up in the Hannibal fandom. which is a little NSFW. So prepare yourselves, chat, for what I'm about to
Cover
explain.
your virgin
Um,
ears, Nick.
the Hannibal fandom, which has been going strong. Hannibal went off the air in 2015, has been going strong ever since. Because the core two guys, Hannibal and Will Graham, are just like like Will Graham is like this virtuosic FBI profiler who can like get in the head of a serial killer. Hannibal is obviously a forensic psychologist who is also a serial killer, and they're like, you know, they're doing that like that dance that like the Sherlock Moriarty dance or whatever. So they have all this like tension between them, and people just really want to make them kiss. Anyway, there is a faction of people called pro shippers who are like creating fan art and fan fiction of this ship. And the pro shippers, one fan artist in particular, drew a picture of a Hannibal giving Will a blowjob that Brian Fuller, the showrunner of Hannibal, liked and commented a heart on Twitter. A heart on, not a heart on, a heart on. Which like everyone flipped out just because like it's like a senpai, it's the ultimate senpai notice me moment,
Right.
right? Like the showrunner of the show who comments a heart on your fan art, which set off this huge thing because like there's a certain sort of like ethical bent to certain kinds of ships, if that makes sense. And there is a really fucked up one when you consider like the Will Graham Hannibal ship. Hannibal induces memory loss in Will in order to protect his identity as a serial killer and eventually frame him for murders that Hannibal has committed, right? Um, which a certain like moralistic bent of the fandom has called like that's really fucked up and unethical, and this is a really gross relationship that you guys are shipping. So these are the anti-shippers, right? And then there are the pro shippers who I guess just think it's hot that Hannibal and Will Graham fuck.
Yeah,
And
so
it devolved into this gigantic Twitter war, and I was like, I have to understand what this is going on. So I've been watching Hannibal.
yeah, no, I've seen this stuff. I didn't realize it was specific to Hannibal. I've like seen like pro
Yeah.
ship and anti ship. I saw a tweet that was like, like somebody quote tweets like, someone's like, if you're pro ship, I don't want anything to do with you. And the quote tweets it and it says, uh, I land lubber or something like that. I was like, that's a funny joke. It's like a ship's like a boat, right? I was like, I didn't realize there was this whole head up. Like, I've seen drama about like fictional, like, like fictional shipping stuff. I'm just like, I know I fall very, very much on the side of like, they're not real in the first place, and they're double not real because it's not like official whatever, right? Like,
Yeah. Hmm.
they,
Yeah, like I mean, I think in general I fall along the same uh lines as you when it comes to this stuff. Like I just do not, I could not possibly care about the fake relationships in fake shows. It's like double fake, right?
yeah,
And I also, like this is the kind of thing that fiction is there for, right? I want to be in a situation where my world is about to be consumed by dark side and Steppenwolf, right? But I like to consume media where I can sort of like adopt those emotions in a certain sort of sense, right? Like I never want to be in a tense gunfight, but I like watching media with tense gunfights because that's fun, right? And I think that kind of thing is that kind of thing is ultimately like fair enough, obviously. Um, but like yeah, the Hannibal, the Hanagram is technically what the ship is called. The Hanagram ship is just like maybe the most fucked up version of like a popular ship that I can think of. Like I don't know that I could think of any other ship in the world where I would be like, woof, yikes. Like shipping these two characters is really weird, but okay. Anyway, I'll have you know that
yeah.
that show is really good. I praised The Sopranos a couple of weeks ago. By a couple of weeks ago, I mean a couple of months ago at this point, for having incredibly realistic dream sequences. Just because the dream sequences are completely nonsensical and like don't make any sense. And Hannibal gives it a run for its money. Hannibal's dream sequences are fucking weird and don't make a lot of sense, and I love them.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a ton of fun. I don't know. I got I got too much on my plate already. I wanna go watch fucking what is it? The David
Mandalorian
Lynch
season
one.
2.
No. I want to.
Oh, Twin Peaks.
Yeah, Twin Peaks. I want to watch Twin Peaks at some point because I never
I
got
have
around to
never
it.
done Twin Peaks, but I would be interested. Cause yeah, I've never done Twin Peaks, but
Yeah.
maybe we should do
No.
that for a
So
podcast.
so I want to recommend to you if because this is really short.
Mm.
David Lynch has a Netflix exclusive short called what Jack did. Which is like him talking to a monkey about like a chicken, like chicken who is the monkey's lover. It is very weird, very esoteric, very great, a lot of fun. I've watched
Okay.
it a couple times now. And it's like 15, 20 minutes, so
Wow, wow, we
doable.
wise, they say.
Yeah. I recommend that to everybody at home too. If you've got Netflix, go check it out. It's got, like I said, David Lynch talking to a monkey. But yeah, do you have anything else you want to talk about before we wrap this up?
No, are we doing Kong versus Godzilla on this cast?
Are we? When does that come out?
Do you have big feelings about Big Monkey versus Laser Lizard? I really love, honestly, Big Monkey memes are just, they're
Mm.
good.
I mean, I'm down for kind of like the weird hyper how much Godzilla is a giant monster and how much Godzilla is like a representation of like the nuclear horrors that Japan had to endure and like how like the politics, like I think that that's super fascinating, right? Because like the political, like what Godzilla represents, like morphs a lot. He turns from like a villain to a hero, right?
Yeah.
And there's probably something in there about like the United States and and also like, man, they also changed like which, like the American Godzilla was created at a different atoll than the Japanese Godzilla.
Oh, really? I didn't know that, actually.
I think one's the Bikini Atoll and one's in like French Polynesia.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a whole mess. They're both like monitor lizards that like got transformed by a nuclear radiation or something like that. When is Godzilla versus King Kong come out?
Next week. Actually, I might be wrong. When is it? Yeah. Oh, okay. So it is the 31st. So next week it will come out. I was like, are we gonna do Godzilla versus Kong for our next episode? But it won't actually be out by then because it comes out that Wednesday.
Good,
Because we obviously have HBO Max subscriptions because we just watched the Snyder cut.
Man,
we still haven't done Mandalorian season 2.
Yeah, I know.
Which I sort of feel bad about. I have a bunch of hot takes for the Mandalorian season 2.
Well,
but they're
took
getting
a while.
colder, Mango.
I need to catch up. I'm sorry, that's me.
Did you watch it? Oh, you haven't watched it yet.
Not yet. I would say like our first Mando rewatch or first Mando watch was like 2, so I don't feel too bad.
That's true. That's definitely true.
All right, well, we should probably get out of here. We're over time.
Yeah, we're way over time.
If
Thank you so much for showing up, everybody in the chat. You guys are the best.
Yeah. If you'd like to tell us what you think about anything we talked about in this episode, you either show up in the chat when it goes live, or you could email us at subversiveplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@subversiveplaygames.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/subversiveplaygames, where you can watch these episodes live, comment live. You can see that we do the interaction with our adoring fans. Thank you, everyone. You can do all the other stuff that I normally say, like rate, review us on podcast services, and we've got a Patreon too, and we've got a YouTube. You can comment on the YouTube too, I guess. But that's everything I have. But do you have anything else you want to promote?
I have nothing else I'm looking to promote.
Well, in that case, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.